Now we will have an overview of this year's conference by the co-organizer of the Seoul Climate Energy Conference, Kim Sang-hyuk. Kim Sang-hyuk is president of the Jeju Research Institute and a visiting professor at the KAIST Graduate School of Green Growth. He is also founder of Coalition for Our Common Future, a think and do platform which examines issues on the Korean Peninsula, including climate change and population change. Welcome to the stage, Kim Sang-hyuk.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. My name is Kim Sang-hyuk, and I have been co-organizing this conference since 2014. Yes, 8 years. And I'd like to share some snapshots of today's conference. Today's main topic is about Korea's carbon neutrality, how to turn it into real actions, not just empty words. As said, Korea made a promise to achieve carbon neutrality by 2050 at the COP26 in Glasgow last month. 2050, it may sound far away, a long, distant future. Then how about 40% cut by 2030? Only 8 years from now on. And it is directly linked to the future of 2050. And it is not just about environment. It is also about our economy, our energy, our life, and our civilization itself. But then again, are we really ready for this big change? Look at this slide that shows fluctuating trajectory of Korea's emission growth rate. It went down and then went up and then back to the place where it used to be. With this fluctuating trajectory, can Korea really realize the pledge we made? At least we need to cut more than 4% at least to meet the new target we announced in Glasgow. Can we really do that? How to turn it into real actions with sustainable economic growth, as Prime Minister Rasmussen emphasized. What are the challenges and opportunities in the course toward carbon neutrality and green growth? That is the main focus of today's conference. For that, we will begin our opening plenary by looking at the global context first, especially the outcome of the recent Glasgow meeting held last month. And we will have a special session with presidential candidates of Korea, because carbon neutrality and climate energy policy absolutely deserves presidential top priority in the next government. We have the right to hear from them directly to make a right choice for our sustainable future, I believe. Then we are going to explore pathways toward carbon neutrality with scientific and professional eyes. Top-notch experts and policymakers are here with us today. Following this, research presentation on various subjects will be done by students of Graduate School of Green Growth, KAIST. Please travel with us through Metaverse. Money is critical to make things happen. That's why we prepared an in-depth session for green climate finance and ESG with top speakers and panelists. Waste is another big problem we must overcome for carbon neutrality. We will do the quest for circular economy with armed clean technology and green entrepreneurship. And it is the young who are real stakeholders in the era of climate change. The 20 and 30 years young generation, young people today, are going to be 50 and 60 years old in the year 2050. That's why they are real stakeholders. So we must listen to the voices from the young and support their capacity building for empowerment. As I said, we have run this conference for 8 years. From green growth education to national carbon neutrality for our common future. We talked about many things. We made many good promises. But frankly speaking, to my eyes, we made no substantial progress, no big change yet. So I can't help asking, what good is it? What kind of meaning is there if the promise only to be unkept? We should not repeat this again because the time may not be on our side anymore. Okay, that's it. And I'm going to move to the opening session with top 3 speakers. First, Professor Robert Stebbins at Kennedy School of Government, Harvard University. Professor Stebbins is one of the renowned scholars in the field of climate change and energy economics. He sent his video message from Boston.
I'm delighted to be with you to talk about what happened at COP26 in Glasgow. I wish I could be present in Seoul, but this is the second best alternative. So I'm going to talk about 4 categories of major issues at COP26. The ones that were big in the press, the ones that were important for most of the delegates, the ones that were important for policy wonks like me, and then one that was, I think, important, for everybody. In terms of the big issues for the press, the first issue, of course, was whether the old and new NDCs add up to consistency with the 2 degrees centigrade target, let alone the 1.5 degrees centigrade target that's in the Paris Climate Agreement. The outcome is that we had 3.7 degrees centigrade trajectory before Paris. With the Paris NDCs, 2.7 degrees centigrade. If we look at the updated NDCs from the United States, the European Union, Korea, and other countries, that would take us to about 2.4 degrees centigrade and as low as 1.8 degrees C if you include all of the aspirational statements about the year 2050 that aren't really part of the Paris Agreement, about net zero emissions and the like, both from governments and also from private industry. Prime Minister Johnson called the COP26 the last best hope, but during the second week, he wisely decided to instead push for more ambition, not at this COP, but at next year's COP. So he kicked the can down the road. Now, some wanted a statement in the decision. The Glasgow Climate Pact voted out at the end to endorse a phase-out of coal and the elimination of fossil fuel subsidies. That wasn't endorsed by the G20 in Rome, so not surprisingly, it got modified at the COP to be a phase-down of unabated coal and to reduce inefficient fossil fuel subsidies. There were also some other side agreements on methane, forestry, and I'll comment on these in a moment. Now, most of the delegations to the annual conference of the parties are, of course, from developing countries. And so one of the two big issues for them was finance, achieving the $100 billion a year commitment and more for both mitigation and adaptation, and making up for the shortfall because, of course, we didn't get to the $100 billion commitment in the year 2020, and it's not clear when we will. The outcome was that the Glasgow Climate Pact urges, it doesn't direct, but it urges countries to double their commitment in the future, which is ironic that we're talking about doubling the target when the target has not yet even been achieved. Another important issue is loss and damage, referring to the fact that even with adaptation, there will still be damages, particularly in the most vulnerable countries and particularly in small island states. This was finessed in the Paris Agreement, where loss and damage was included, but then in the accompanying decision, it said it's not the basis for compensation or legal liability. The outcome is that the wealthy countries of the world blocked the proposal for a new fund for loss and damage payments in Glasgow, and instead they set up a dialogue for research and discussion in future conferences of the parties. Now, in terms of the big issues for policy wonks, one of them was, would China and the United States return to global co-leadership on climate policy by returning to the spirit and reality of cooperation that existed under the Obama administration, as opposed to the spirit and reality of confrontation that we got during the Trump administration and that sadly continues during the first year of the Biden administration. There was a surprise joint announcement by the USA and China on Wednesday of the second week, but it didn't advance ambition and it really didn't influence other countries. The other big issue for the policy wonks was, would the Article 6 rulebook be completed with sensible text as opposed to counterproductive text? And here, the outcome was not perfect, but two problematic elements, one called overall mitigation of global emissions, the other of share of proceeds, both of which are either an explicit or an implicit tax on trading, were included in Article 6.4, essentially a continuation of the clean development mechanism, but fortunately are not included in Article 6.2, which is the accounting mechanism to make sure there isn't double counting when different jurisdictions link their policies together and they carry out exchanges from one firm to another in different jurisdictions. Not part of the negotiations, but obviously potentially important, is the deal of more than 100 countries to cut their methane emissions by 30% by the end of this decade. But we should take note of the fact that China was not included in that. Now, in terms of an issue for everyone, it was the elephant in the room. I thought it would be much discussed by delegates, by civil society, and by the press, and that is, could this new and very ambitious nationally determined contribution from the United States Biden administration, a 50 to 52% reduction below the 2005 level by 2030, is this achievable with reasonably anticipated policies in the United States, either laws or regulations? Not hoped for policies, but reasonably anticipated ones. And the answer is probably not, because of congressional politics and because of legal challenges we anticipate for regulations. But the outcome, interestingly enough, in Glasgow was that all three groups, delegates, civil society, and the press, seemed to be so happy to have the Biden administration instead of the Trump administration in power and having rejoined the Paris Agreement, that there was a remarkable willing suspension of disbelief by the delegates and by others, and this issue was hardly discussed by a polite conversation. So I will thank you for that. That is my quick summary of the results of COP26. I went through it quickly. If you'd like more information, I encourage you to go to the website of the Harvard Project on Climate Agreements, where I have an essay that I wrote that's much longer than this brief keynote message. Also, the Harvard Environmental Economics program, my own website, my blog, to which I hope many of you subscribe. And of course, you can follow me on Twitter. So I encourage you to go to all of those. And again, I really do thank you very much. Delightful to be with you in Seoul. I wish it could have been in person.
Well, thank you. Well, the secretariat of this conference kindly said to me that it's okay for me to remove my mask because this room is fully secured against coronavirus. Thank you. Well, yeah, I'm also happy to have Mr. Biden as the president of the United States rather than Mr. Trump. But it is still sad to hear that even the U.S. will be having hard time to keep its enhanced NDC target, enhanced pledge, due to the domestic political struggle. And as he said, I also found despair and hope in Glasgow when I attended the conference last month. But I'm trying to be positive because there is no other option but to be positive. Then what would be the Korea's perspective on the outcome of the Glasgow? For that, we have Climate Ambassador of Korea, Madam Kim Hyo-eun. Good morning, Ambassador. Are you with us?
Good morning, Professor Kim. Can you hear me?
Yes, thank you for joining us. And now the screen is yours, and after your remark, a speech, I'll do a brief Q&A. Would that be okay?
Absolutely. First of all, thank you very much for organizing this meaningful session. I think this is a very important opportunity to reconfirm Korea's commitment regarding carbon neutrality and also achieving the NDC by 2030. Therefore, I'm happy to share Korea's assessment about COP26 and also what should be done from now on. So before I start, I would like to share my short presentation. Just a second, please. I'm sorry for this inconvenience.
It's okay, but then how about this? Before you do
Yes.
prepare presentation, we can invite another speaker for the time being. Would that be
Okay, I need to, so maybe it's better for me to
maybe
send
you
this
check?
file
Well,
to
your staff
the Secretariat's email.
and
Yes.
our secretariat will check the problem, and we will get back to you within 5
Okay,
minutes.
great.
Okay?
Yeah. Thank you very much.
Thank you, thank you. Well, it happens all the time, you know.
Thanks.
And well, I understand Korea played a very important role in making annual youth forum attached to the conference of parties. And I'm so glad to hear the news that Korea played a role in making the role of young generation more powerful in the climate negotiation. And having said that, representing young generation, a student from China, Zhao Tongyi, is with us. She graduated from Beijing University and entered the Graduate School of Green Growth last year. Zhao Tongyi, good morning.
Good morning, Professor. Long time no see.
Yes, how are you there in Beijing? How's the weather?
I'm doing good. It's really cold right now.
Well, due to the as you know, the coronavirus, she's studying green growth in Beijing this time. Okay, I'm so happy to have you, and please have your say to our audience.
Sure. Thank you, Professor, and please take your time, Ambassador. Good morning, honorable guests, dear Seoul Climate and Energy Conference organizers, my dear professors, and my fellow KAIST friends. It is my great pleasure to be with you all this morning to give this address at a conference of such importance. Now, to both offline and online delegates, I would like to send you all my most sincere regards and wish you all stay warm and, most importantly, sound and healthy before we say goodbye to 2021. Now, although the pandemic is still rampant across the continent, and we still have 3 weeks left before officially entering 2022, the past year has been no doubt a year that has embraced bold changes and challenges. Take myself as an example, I made up my mind to take on the new track of green growth. And over the past year, with the help of my kind colleagues and professors at KAIST, I tried to give my solutions with my friends in various courses and competitions to tackle the environmental challenges. I am sure that this conference is offering us more professional and scientific perspectives that would be constructive in forming the participating student delegates' unique responses to the world challenges on energy and climate change. For those who care about our Mother Nature and students who have determination to build their career upon the belief of a better, sustainable world, we are fortunate enough to have welcomed a year of making promises and plans to deliver such a vision. At the COP26 that just took place in Glasgow, we're glad that young people have made their demands and ambitions heard at one of the most important climate conferences in the world. Youth have declared that they are critical stakeholders in creating solutions and contributing to climate change. And we are certainly should be anticipating new opportunities suggested in the promising document of the Manifesto of Youth for Climate, of which one of the key messages is to request the governments to scale up financial, administrative, and logistical support to foster the engagement of youth to effectively drive climate ambition and concrete actions. Now, this reminds me of the very first assignment when I began my study here, where our honorable Professor Kim Sang-hyuk asked us to describe what we believe to be the biggest risk facing our time. Despite the foreign students mentioning risks ranging from financial crisis to climate change, most of the Korean students, as far as I can recall, mentioned the risk of being unemployed and a sense of insecurity and uncertainty of their future. While it is true that sometimes misfortune is a blessing in disguise, the manifesto called for the most urgently needed holistic, diversified, and inclusive energy transition by 2030 and requested financing for capacity building, research, and technology sharing to ensure a transition with decent jobs, providing adequate support for the affected and vulnerable communities. The reality of a growing, uncertain world is making supporting the most vulnerable a priority in response to the current crisis. I am very glad that this manifesto is not simply another declamation of fancy but void jargon that shows only the naivety of young generations. It touches upon the necessity of capacity building that equips us with the tools that we need to create a future for ourselves. Within the coming days, we will all be exposed to a wide range of topics on energy, climate change, green finance, carbon market, etc. And the conference has kindly offered our program the chance to communicate our research and business projects with our honorable guests. This is indeed a precious opportunity for us to receive valuable feedback on our works. On the other hand, it is also a good time for our guests to communicate with us about the most akin issues and topics that we are concerned about. I'm very proud to be in the same position with an amazing student body with diversified academic and professional background. And I feel just the same excited about the coming days of active exchange of opinions and knowledge on climate and energy issues. This conference, I am sure, will not only bring about greater understanding and cooperation between the many parties that are represented here, but will look to bold new initiatives. Now, may I wish you an enjoyable and productive conference. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Tony, for your great contribution to our conference. Well, the US and China are the two biggest economy and biggest emitters in the world, but they are in deep conflict now. But as Professor Stebbins said, In Glasgow, we witnessed, rather than cooperation, we witnessed confrontation. To a young person like you, how do you feel?
Thank you, Professor. This is a very tricky question, but a question of great importance. I feel very honored to be sharing my own perspectives on this issue with you guests here. The word conflict is very precise in describing the situation that we have now. And personally, I don't think that the China-US competition will go away, at least in the near future. However, I do argue that how this competition is framed would have a great influence. If we stick to the lazy arguments that the two nations are culturally or ideologically destined to clash, then the result of the competition might be disappointing to all of us. However, if it is framed correctly, I am convinced that it will actually bring attention to solving the common challenges. So if you look closely, it's not hard to find common problems and challenges. Climate change, as we have been mentioning, has been acknowledged by the leaders of the two countries as a crisis that takes effort to tackle with. Social inequality, as another example, is not only described as a problem in capitalist societies, but also a task for the Chinese government as well. So in other words, a new framework to look at the reality today could tell us about the real nature of competition, which is not about outdoing the other party, but about which superpower solves its domestic problems first. So both President Xi Jinping's Common Prosperity and President Joe Biden's Build Back Better are doing just that. So that would be my short answer for your question, but I certainly look forward to more discussion.
Okay, thank you. Please stay healthy and see you in person as soon as possible. Now I think we have Ambassador Kim back. Thank you. I'm sorry for the trouble. Then I think we are ready for Ambassador's presentation. Okay, the screen is yours.
Yeah, thank you. Actually, the Secretariat is ready to share the. Yes, it's on. There are mixed views regarding the outcome of COP26, and Professor Stavens, he delivered very useful view from the perspective of civil society leaders. By the way, Korea believes that COP26 outcome, Glasgow Climate Pact, is a balanced outcome on mitigation, adaptation, and finance, particularly reflecting all parties' interests. I know that that document, the outcome of COP26 is not 100% satisfactory. However, because we didn't meet the target of 1.5 degrees Celsius, if 120 world leaders gathered together and then they announced their net zero by 2050 plan and also their enhanced NDC ambition. However, according to the IEA, International Energy Agency, if countries will 100% implement what they committed, then the world is going to reach 1.8 degree rise by the end of this century. Therefore, we still have a gap. And in that sense, COP26 results is not 100% satisfactory. However, I would like to say that we are in the right track, and all countries, they reconfirmed the strong commitment to achieve a 1.5 degree ambition. Therefore, the COP26 outcome is a good basis for further actions in the future. And I would like to highlight US-China joint Glasgow Declaration on enhancing climate action. It was announced at the very later stage of the negotiation, and it provided meaningful driving force. Of course, some particularly the outside of the government experts, from their perspective, it is not completely satisfactory. However, it was a good agreement to provide a clear signal to the world that US and China, they are willing to work together on climate change issue. And in COP26, there were many sectoral and coalition approaches, such as Method Pledge, Breakthrough Agenda, and PPCA, and many others. Therefore, I would like to emphasize that COP26 was the most inclusive climate conference, inviting not only government officials, but also like civil society leaders, business sector representatives, youth representatives, and many others. And in line with that, COP26 recognized the human rights component in climate action, and also the strong role of youth, indigenous people, women, and other stakeholders. And finally, we agreed that we are going to invite host country of the future COP meeting to organize annual Youth Climate Forum, because we believe that youth, they are the strong stakeholder in climate, in global climate action. Next slide, please. So COP26 made a progress. We confirmed keeping 1.5 degree Celsius ambition alive. And we have a good timetable and mechanism to accelerate our actions, because we agreed to start a new work program, and we agreed to start annual ministerial roundtable to accelerate the actions to increase the ambition of NDCs. And also, many people express the disappointment regarding the word phase down coal power plants. However, we must bear in mind that this is the first time in COP outcome document which has coal power plants. Therefore, it's a good starting. We are going to accelerate the phasing down coal power plants. And then if we continue phasing down, then we will phase out coal power plants. And also, we agreed to scale up adaptation finance. And as Professor Stevenson pointed out, yes, still there is a gap in the climate finance, climate financial support from developed countries to developing countries. The developed countries didn't meet the commitment of 100 billion. Still, we have almost 220 billion gap. However, we agreed to accelerate to implement the commitment. And also, we are going to start post-2025 climate finance from next year. And Paris rulebook, so-called Article 6 regarding international carbon trading, and also Article 13 regarding the reporting, and also common time framework of the NDC, all those key elements of Paris Agreement were agreed. And I believe it gives a very strong signal, particularly to the private sector, that this is the direction and strong climate action will continue. Next slide, please. So the impact of COP26. COP26, we prepared for almost 2 years. Therefore, I would like to invite people to think, to focus on the preparatory process of COP26. If we're looking at COP26 as a process, huge shift took place, not only in Korea, but also globally. Therefore, the global community, we put ourselves in the right direction. Particularly clear shift we can witness from the private sector, business sector, and finance sector. And also, as I already mentioned, Article 6.2 and 6.4, the international carbon trading, I think this will work in the future for particularly business people to invest and work further in strong climate areas. Next slide, please. So what Korea should do after COP26? We already announced our net zero target by 2050, and then we announced the very ambitious NDC 40% cut by 2030, and also President Moon Jae-in, he declared the phase out coal by 2050. Therefore, now what we have to do is implementation, implementing NDCs and carbon neutrality target. So declaration is one thing and implementation is another. And also at Glasgow COP, we agreed very detailed reporting mechanism. Therefore, there is no exception among countries not in reporting what they are going to do. So I would like to emphasize again the strong action to achieve the target of NDC and carbon neutrality. By the way, I would like to highlight that Korea is also contributing in helping developing countries of their climate action. We doubled our contribution to Green Climate Fund, and we will create Green New Deal Fund in Global Green Growth Institute. And we also increase our ODA, green ODA, up to the level of the average of the OECD countries. And finally, I'd like to emphasize there will be one more very, very important global event to be held in Korea next year. That is World Forestry Congress in Seoul, which to be held in May 2022. That's the biggest global forestry meeting. And we all know that forestry is a key component of global climate action. And Korea is a model country who successfully achieved forestation in last 50 years. Therefore, I believe that Korea has many things to share with the developing countries in forestation and REDD. Therefore, I would like to invite all audience of this meeting to pay attention to this important global event in May next year. Okay, I must stop here, and thank you very much for giving me this opportunity to share what Korea's assessment about COP26.
Thank you, Ambassador. I didn't know that we are going to have a very big global forestry forum because it is natural CCS, carbon capture and storage system. So as we are running out of time, I'm going to ask a very brief question. Mr. Boris Johnson, Prime Minister of UK, the host country of COP26, said that we need more ambition and we shall meet again next year to raise our ambition. Does that mean Korea needs to enhance its target more? And what worry, we didn't started yet our new journey. So what worries you most? What is the most challenging part of Korea's carbon neutrality?
That's the question I receive quite often after COP26 meeting.
Okay.
Yes, the Glasgow Climate Pact says we invite countries to review and revisit their NDC if necessary and submit enhanced NDC by the end of 2022. But it is mainly inviting countries who submitted weak NDC or NDCs which is not in line with 1.5 degree ambition. But I would like to emphasize that Korea's NDC with 40% cut, it is closely and it is very seriously aligned with net zero by 2050 and also 1.5 degree ambition. Therefore, Korea doesn't need to revisit and redevelop the NDC by next year. We will submit our 40% cut NDC by the end of this year, and then we will start implementation.
Thank you. So Korea's new NDC is strong enough to be aligned with the global goals. What is important is how to make that promise into actions. Thank you. Now this is how I'll conclude my opening session, and now we are going to move on to the next session with 4 presidential candidates. Thank you. Karen?
With this, we end the opening ceremony of the 8th Annual Seoul Climate Energy Conference 2021. Thank you again for your full participation.